Well, welcome. My name's Mark Gessner, and thanks for attending our session. I'm going to upload right now PowerPoint, a little slide, so you remember and know where you're at. This is about realizing margin and impact along with your nonprofit mission. And we are going to introduce ourselves in a second, but we'd love to know a little bit about who's in the room or who's in the Zoom. And we have two all-important questions for you. And I'm going to also show the slideshow. But here's the launch. The first question is trying to understand what your perspective is. And the second vitally important question is, what's your favorite beverage? So we can't vote, so we'd love to know how you vote. And I think Shauna, who's helping us, will reveal your all-important votes in a moment. Okay. So as you're doing that, we're going to, Shauna, you want to, are people voted? You want to do the vote? All right. So we've got a mix. I don't know if people can see this, but we have 8 folks who are nonprofit professional, and then we have a mix of others, some identifying themselves as entrepreneurs, a couple of students and others. And the award-winning beverage of your choice is water, which indeed is my favorite. So cheers to you. We can close the poll. Now we know who you are. We'll tell you a little bit about who we are and why we're here to share about realizing margin and impact along with your nonprofit mission. And I'd like to start, if I could, on my screen. I see Mainza first. So Mainza, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mainza Tao, and I am the Assistant Deputy Director for WHEDA, the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority. We are a quasi-government housing authority, and we work in the spaces of affordable housing for our Wisconsin residents, as well as economic development. I was also very privileged and honored to have been a part of the Mission Fuel program prior to moving over to WHEDA as well, and very excited to share the impact of that program during my time at the Hmong Chamber when I was in the program, but also WHEDA continues to support Mission Fuel, and what is our why for continuing to support Mission Fuel.
Thank you, Mainza. And so terrific to have you here, Mainza, from Cohort 1 of Mission Fuel, a program you'll learn about in a little bit, the trend center that she is. And why don't we go to Roxy? And Roxy, when you introduce yourself, if you want to add in, or if anyone wants to add in a little bit about any short perspective you have on what social impact is, that would be good too. But Roxy, why don't you go next?
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roxy Hunt. I'm the founding executive director of CEOs of Tomorrow, and I'll be sharing a little bit more about the organization at a later time. I too have had the privilege of working with Mission Fuel as one of the instructors, and really have enjoyed not only meeting the participants, but also seeing their awesome innovation. Social impact. I would say the effect an organization has on the well-being of the community. And that well-being is really, truly impacted purposely by the organization or business. Thank you, Mark.
It just rolls off your tongue, Roxy. That was part and parcel of who you are, though, I think, living, breathing social impact in our community. Why don't we go to Kay, and we'll swing back to mine at the end. Kay, would you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Kay Hartman, and I am the Vice President of Planning and Resource Development for UMOS. We are a multi-service organization. We have a footprint in about 7 states, and we operate 3 divisions, which has a lot of programs under each one: workforce development, childhood development, and social services. And social impact to me is intentionally working together to move the needle in meeting community need for the long term. And having impact. I mean, obviously it's in the word, but you know, really having a sustainable impact.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Kay. Glad you're here. And Mainza, maybe we'll swing back to you with thoughts on what social impact is all about.
Well, I love that Roxy and Kay already responded. I'm just gonna say ditto to everything that they both said. And the very intentional words that they used, right? Purposeful, intentional, sustainable. That's what social impact is. If we truly want to affect and drive change in our communities to meet the needs of our communities, that's what social impact is to me. And that, you know, is done through intentional, purposeful sharing of resources, as well as influence. We all have influence over our networks and partners, and how do we influence others, leverage the influence we have over others to also contribute to social impact work.
Yeah, thanks, Mainza. And yeah, it sure is, from my perspective, those things and the trick in measuring it is really tough. So there's such deep change that can happen, but how do you assess and measure that, I think is really part of the challenge of it all. So we're going to talk as a panel here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the agenda and then launch into some content and discussion. So you've heard Mission Fuel a couple of times, and I'm going to give an overview of what Mission Fuel is about, and you'll learn about that from at least my perspective, and then a little bit of reflection from three colleagues here. And then we'll transition into a little more content, a little description of each of the organizations or programs that the panelists lead. And then we'll end with a discussion. I'll talk a little bit, trying to connect the dots and see how we can live up to this title around impact in nonprofits. So I'm going to share my screen again, and let's see if we got it here, and go down to description of Mission Fuel. Let me do a slideshow. All right. So one of my colleagues, you can see this all right? Yeah, great, thanks. So here's where we started with Mission Fuel just over 4 years ago, almost 5, when we saw the issue that nonprofits in our community were facing, not just in our community, but in many. Several of us were getting together, some with nonprofit experience, business experience, diverse partners, and focused on the fact that they have not only a lack of earned income and diverse revenue streams, but they had an overdependence on foundations and public funding, which frankly is driving, it's a frustrating piece of the equation. And we thought they had the capacity, they were wondering about the capacity to be entrepreneurs. Could they have the capacity, access to sustainable wealth? They were lacking that, and there was too much time fighting over the crumbs, right? Going after the next $1,000 or $500. So these were all problems, all challenges in their capacity and their situation. And here's the solution we came up with, and this is a big part of those of you in entrepreneurship know, you try to identify the problem and then look for a solution. And our solution was this holistic program. It's really all about social enterprise, where we combined our central piece of Mission Fuel is a business accelerator model, but it's specifically designed for nonprofit leaders. So with them in mind, there's a number of things that are different and distinct from other for-profit accelerators. We bring in business mentors who are from the business community, but are helping with translation and support for the organizations that are in this. We have technical support, which is more specific business operations or things that the organization is trying to work on to develop their social enterprise idea. There's various professional development. We build a community of nonprofit leaders. There's leadership coaching, a really vital part of the program where we focus on the individual. And if you're looking to lead innovation, what does that mean to you? How do you go about it? What's your why, and what's your process of doing that? We meet now 16 times. Mine's had to meet a little bit more in the first cohort, but in total we have an orientation in 15 weeks. We really pride ourselves and strive for diverse cohort composition in all the meetings diversity has. You'll learn about that in a little bit. We try to have some extra access and agency. Often nonprofit leaders don't feel like they have a door into open business doors or investors or other access. We talk a lot about mind shift and innovation mindset, which you'll hear about more later. And we keep trying to grow the pie and not fight over the crumbs. That's been a mantra for us, so that we work to accomplish more together than try to compete for that next few $1,000s. This is our value proposition, that we move nonprofit organizations from financial dependency to self-sufficiency through earned income strategies, innovation, and leadership development. It's really those combination of things that allow us to, I think, have the total impact that we do accomplish, and makes this accelerator distinct. That's our Rockstar team. I just want to hats off. Some of them may be listening, and Roxy's a member of the team. You can learn more about them. And a few examples, you'll hear a bit more from Mainza, but here's a snapshot. And I think more has happened since that, Mainza, but we know that through some of their workforce alignment work, they've been garnering more grants and contracts over the last few years. The Hmong Chamber is doing incredible work. There's different partnerships with our students and project-based learning. One of the mentors that they had the first year became an employee, so that was a neat switch. And then one of the team members went from this program to enroll and since graduate from an MBA program at the Cardinal Stritch. Another example is Can Water for Kids. It's water with a purpose. You can see their amazing branding. They're really about bringing clean, safe drinking water to kids who don't have that, whether that's Milwaukee, Flint, or somewhere else around the world. And they developed a project in Mission Fuel around sponsorships. So now they'll tell you that each of those bottles is worth $75,000 when they get the right sponsor. Some have started their work before they get to us and are continuing afterwards, for sure. It's a continuum. Many of you may have heard of Walnut Way Conservation Corps in the Milwaukee area. They've been doing amazing work to develop their wellness commons at Broken Ground. That's something they furthered along during their cohort work. So those are a few stories, and these are organizations they each have a story of impact and a project they worked on in Mission Fuel. And this doesn't include, these are the first 3 cohorts, doesn't include the most recent cohort, but in some they've earned more than $8 million in projects they've worked on within Mission Fuel, breaking down silos, collaborating in new ways they hadn't expected. You can see some of the stats around who participates and diversity of organizations and their different missions, and the individuals that come from diverse backgrounds. Lots of focus on growing sustainable wealth. And we just launched Cohort 4, where we have 7 new organizations, 16 new leaders. And this time, because it's all online and we plan to be online, there's a geographic diversity for the first time as well. So you can learn more about that somewhere in other places, but I'm going to stop sharing and ask just for a little bit of reflection. I went through that pretty quick, and wondering if, why don't we start with Cohort 1 alum in mind's a little bit of reflection of your connection to Mission Fuel.
Sure, thanks, Mark. So as Mark said, at the time I was with the Hmong Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce as the executive director. The Hmong Chamber is a nonprofit, a statewide nonprofit that works in the economic development space, and specifically targeting small businesses of color, and more specifically, the Hmong and Asian American businesses in the state of Wisconsin. When we decided to participate in Mission Fuel, we already had a priority within our organization at the time that we needed to diversify our revenue streams. We had forecasted quite a few years back that we knew grant funding availabilities was becoming much more limited, and we knew we needed to start pivoting. And Mission Fuel came along right at the right time, because we had very limited capacity. And so Mission Fuel kind of forced us, right, to have that dedicated time to really be much more intentional and strategic with where were we going to make that pivot, that shift into diversifying our revenue streams. At that point, we were heavily funded by state and federal grants. And then we also had small income from membership, and then a small income from earned revenues from our loan products that we had out there for small businesses. But knowing that we needed to grow our loan products in the interim, what were we going to do to diversify revenue streams? And so the weeks that we were with Mission Fuel, it really was this dedicated time to just think about how we were going to do this within our organization and do it very sustainably as well. And so it was about having that time to ideate kind of different opportunities we could pursue, and then having folks, experts like Roxy and the other folks who were on the previous slide, who coached us through some of these barriers that we thought were, in front of us, helping us coach through, as well as learning different tactics and strategies on how we get from A, the ideation piece, to B, to C, to then implementing, and to finding the seed funding. So for me, I think truly the impact was just having that dedicated time with a wonderful network of resources and connections to help us understand how do we innovate and how do we really start pivoting. The second piece real quickly too was the innovation piece. We were an organization, and the Hmong Chamber still is an organization that works with small businesses. But being in Mission Fuel, it was funny. It was an aha, but duh moment of, we really should practice what we preach, right? We're trying to teach small businesses to be more innovative and to be entrepreneurial, and yet we were still functioning like a traditional nonprofit. And so it was just having that stark realization and understanding that we really needed to stay up to date on how nonprofits serving small businesses should be operating. And that was, I think, the biggest takeaway that to this day in my role at WIDA stays top of mind for me, is the innovations that you can be forward thinking.
Yeah, thanks, Mines. It's, that whole concept of disciplined entrepreneurship, or really thinking purposely about what you're doing and putting yourself in that environment. And I appreciate that continuum you talked about, from ideation to that impact. And then at the end, and this is Kay's favorite part, I know, is about pitching. And one of the things we do at the end, and we've refined it in different ways over time, is the practice of pitching a new idea. So I'm teasing Kay a little bit, because that was not her favorite part, but she had a growth experience and pitched in the end. But Kay, your cohort 2 representative, a little bit of a reflection on the program?
I think it was cohort 3. We were the COVID cohort.
Oh, I'm sorry, cohort 3, of course.
Yeah,
yes.
And so we had to pivot from, it was an in-person class into the virtual environment. So that was a learning experience in itself. But I was joined by a colleague of mine, Mariana Rodriguez, who is our Latina Resource Center program director. And the reason we participated and decided to tackle this thing that included a pitch is that our Latina Resource Center had just acquired a newly renovated space, and we wanted to create visibility, and we also needed to diversify funding, because it is significantly funded through government grants. And we've been very successful, and it's been working, but we're worried about, when does that stop, And we needed to come up with some different ways of thinking, and then going after resources so that we can continue to sustain the programs that we've started, which are great, and meet a community need. And so I am a self-proclaimed introvert, which is why the pitch part was not my favorite. But I also challenge myself to do this, because I know I have to think outside the box and step out of my comfort zone. And, my mindset is nonprofit, it's social work, it's grants, it's, that's where my brain goes automatically. And Mission Fuel provided the business component that I just don't have that background at all. And so I learned a ton about sales, about value statements, about, where can you get revenue that you don't normally think about as a nonprofit leader, and so it was a tremendous experience, and I appreciated being a part of it, even during the COVID pandemic and all that kind of stuff. But really, really great program.
Yeah, thanks, Kay. And talk about, the major pivot of a lifetime, as Kay was talking about the COVID pivot and going online, which was just added so much, obviously, to all of our lives, but came through with flying colors. And appreciate your focus on the mindset shift. We spend the first third of the program on laying a foundation around that business mindset for the nonprofit leaders. So talk about in a different perspective, maybe a little bit different mindset approaching this. One of my colleagues on the staff team, Dr. Roxy Hentz, who's been with the program Mission Fuel since the beginning. As an instructor, Roxy, maybe a little perspective from your lens?
Sure. And it was great hearing the feedback from the two of you. My background is in education as well as in business, and I've worn both of those hats for my entire professional career. So coming on to Mission Fuel, I've always had a focus in business and entrepreneurship. And when I say always, literally, I was born into a family of entrepreneurs. I also run a nonprofit organization and opened my first at age 25. And always thought of running a nonprofit like a business, because it really is. And in our field, in the nonprofit field, it isn't often where the leaders of those organizations have had a lot of exposure to business and entrepreneurship, but they're wise, quick, and driven. So I'm excited about Mission Fuel because together, thought leaders who are real strong advocates and community leaders in their organizations get to come together collectively as a cohort and really begin to think about their nonprofit as an actual business. When I think about it from the instructional lens, we really focus on looking at lean startup and utilizing customer discovery and looking at your nonprofit organization through the lens of a business model. And I think most importantly, thinking about, even though you're a not-for-profit, it doesn't mean you can't earn profits. The profits just go back into the organization. So how can you still look at your organization or business as an entrepreneurial venture? One of the major thing that happens in Mission Fuel is giving people the tools to not only look at their organizations as a business and see their stakeholders as customers, but also in that, how do we earn revenue? Is there a way that we can still address our mission while at the same time innovatively bringing in an arm, a business, so to speak, that really does bring in sustainable revenue that also supports the mission? So it's been an exciting journey for me because I've been able to see like this brilliance unfold as nonprofit leaders are really rolling up their sleeves and creatively opening up their minds to another world in which to run their businesses, again, their nonprofit businesses, as entrepreneurial leaders. The other benefit is the cohort, and this was already said. When you get a group of brilliant people in a room together, that collective IQ is off the chart. And that's what I also saw, where each member who participated was not only able to benefit from their own growth and development, but really also benefit from the insight, intellect, inspiration, creativity of those who are also in the cohort. So I've been a proud member of the team of dedicated people who are committed to really making a difference in the community by empowering nonprofit leaders to go out there and continue to change the world.
Thank you, Roxy. That was beautiful. And you really captured, I appreciate highlighted a number of things, and I would accentuate the point around sort of the misnomer or the nonprofit label, what that means or what it doesn't mean. So thanks for highlighting that. And the wisdom in the room, the leveraging colleagues and collaborating with new ideas and feeding off of each other is such an important part of the program. And so those pieces and what you just heard, everybody, really helps, hopefully gives you a sense of what Mission Fuel is about. And we want to transition here in a moment, and maybe Roxy, I'm going to start with you again in a sec, to focus more on how each of these three leaders, more about their own organizations and how they're achieving their social impact, and give you all ideas to shape your leadership for your organization and your work. I would lastly, though, highlight something Roxy hit on, and really something I think each person hit on. It's this balance of mission and margin, and now how you can't have one without the other, right? No margin, no mission, no mission, no margin. There's no reason for being, so why make money? But without some money, it's awfully hard to fulfill the mission. So we talk about that balance a lot, and that's my own roots in this work. I ran nonprofits, primarily youth hostels at the local, regional, and national level, and that was always a tension. How do you do the right pricing? How you bring on enough margin to fulfill the mission? In that case, it was cross-cultural exchange. So a lot of us talking together tried to help that evolve into this program. So that's Mission Fuel. That's a foundation that we wanted to share. But now we want to turn to each of you. Roxy, let's start with you, if we can do that. And each person is going to share a little bit more in depth about their current organization and related to our theme. Can't hear you just yet. I think you're on mute, Roxy. There you
The
go.
fun of working in Zoom. I'll share my screen again. Can you all see the screen? All right, my name is Roxy Hintz, as I shared before. I am the founding executive director of CEOs of Tomorrow. I actually launched CEOs of Tomorrow in 2016 as a pilot, just a 4-week summer program, very much like we teach, to start small, to really investigate the program and then grow it from there. By 2017, we were operating full-time, year-round. We teach social entrepreneurship education to youth. I told you earlier that I am a lover of education and entrepreneurship. So I've had the benefit of marrying my two loves. For us, social entrepreneurship education is teaching students to identify, study, and confront issues that are important to them, and then wrapping business concepts and skills around it. Our youth open real businesses that make real money, that also address social issues and environmental issues of importance to them. And they've addressed racism, immigration issues, sex trafficking, global warming, and the list goes on and on. As of today, our youth, let me forward that here, our youth, our teens in particular, so just to back up a little, we work with youth in grades 4 through 12. We offer 5 programs for teens and only 1 for younger students. So our main focus is around teens. We have 5 programs ranging from teaching and understanding business and entrepreneurship to taking them to Africa to work with teens who are orphaned and helping to give of their knowledge so that other teens can benefit from entrepreneurship. Before they leave, they actually help them launch a revenue generating business. In our very short years, our youth have launched 100 businesses for social good. One of our youth actually was just on national TV with his business. Our youth have supported 33 organizations locally, nationally, and internationally with their businesses, largely through donation of profits, and also bringing awareness to organizations that are doing great work around their social issues. In total, so far, they've addressed 39 issues, and many of them address similar issues because many are faced with the same challenges. In just their business launches alone, meaning the first day they launched, they've earned $12,000 in profits. Those monies go back to our students. They also earn high school credits and college credits as a result of participating in our programs. I do want to draw your attention to one of our programs called Innovation Studio. This is a newer program we launched in 2020. Always forget because of COVID, that year's kind of, but it's been great. It is a project design business or program. And just to give a quick synopsis, the students are with us for 9 months. They're designing business kits in a box for 8 to 14-year-olds that ultimately are sold nationally. They research intensively kids 8 to 14 as well as their parents. And over time, by the end of the spring, they build prototypes. They test those prototypes with 25 to 50 youth. And then they finalize their impactful creations, they're formally called, and put them on the market by the end of the year. They also reap multiple benefits as they participate. Last year during the pilot, the students launched 2 impactful creations. One is a homemade gummy bear business where kids ages 8 to 14 have everything they need to start a homemade gummy bear business, including a 37-page book that walks them through marketing, logo design, pricing, and everything they need to actually launch the business. The second box that the students created was a homemade lotion business. That too is $45, available right now on our website. The students in this particular business, 8 to 14-year-olds, get this packet in the mail, and they're able to make lotion. And again, they too receive all the curriculum in the box they need to launch the business. This year will be our 2nd year. We've now built a production room for impactful creations that our teams will manage. And new boxes will be coming out this year. I don't know what they are because the kids designed them, but just wanted to share that. And then finally, we have a vast array of revenue streams, including multiple ways in which we earn our own revenue, in addition to the traditional government funding, foundation funding, and so forth. But we have a large array of revenue streams. That's CEOs of Tomorrow in a nutshell.
Thank you, Roxy. I was thinking through, is maybe some point it's going to be called CEOs of Today. I don't know. It sounds like they are.
That name was actually taken.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Well,
Yes.
it's amazing work, and talk about practicing what you preach. Clearly teaching social entrepreneurism and many of the lines so well with some of the things we've been talking about with Mission Fuel. So thank you, Roxy, for that. I'm just going to let folks know that you might want to, if you want to start asking questions, we're going to have a little time at the end for questions. And so if you have a question for Roxy or another panelist, maybe you can pop them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll try to get to some of those. So Kay, I know that's a hard act to follow, but can you share some, and I know you're up to it, eminently qualified, if you can share some about UMOS and more about your work.
Sure. Thank you again. UMOS is really an advocacy organization, but our mission is to provide programs and services to improve the employment, educational, health, and housing opportunities for underserved populations. We have our roots in serving the migrant farm worker population, and we still do that today. So it's very much a part of identity, but it is not everything we do. We are multicultural and multi-state. And as I mentioned before, we have 3 service divisions: workforce development, childhood development, and social services. We get about 95 to 98% of our funding through government grants or cooperative agreements. That's federal, state, and local. We also have a small smattering of foundation grants. But we really wanted to look at how can we diversify that, because everyone's competing for the same dollars these days. And we also have programs that require match dollars, and we cannot use federal resources to match federal resources. We have to find our own. So if we create a great program and the next funding cycle comes along and there's a match required, we don't feel good about just stopping that program because we can't come up with the match. So that's where things like Mission Fuel and social entrepreneurial thinking comes to play, to generate those resources so that we can continue to provide all the programs and services that we do. For the project with Mission Fuel in particular, our Latina Resource Center is a human trafficking victim service provider. And so it was a bit unfortunate that COVID occurred, because our original idea was to sell training and tools and resources for identifying victims to the hospitality industry, hotels, motels, conventions, places that see human trafficking but may not know they're seeing human trafficking. And then COVID hit, and guess what happened to that industry? So we had to pivot, and that seems to be the word of 2020. And we looked at where else can we get revenue? We have this expertise, so who can we provide our expertise to? And there's value to it, so why don't we get paid for it? So we shifted and we said, hey, the federal government, yes, we get grants, but we don't really get, there's different distinctions between grants and contracts with the federal government, but perhaps we could be an official contractor where we get a firm fixed price to provide a service. And so that was our idea, and that is what we wrapped our hands around. It's what's interesting right now is that while it hasn't necessarily gone in the direction of human trafficking, I'm happy to say that just in recent weeks, in fact, that we have been able to get a contract doing something a little bit different, but it is a firm fixed price contract. And so, if we manage our expenses well, that's where you see some margin that we can then put back into the organization. So we're exploring that even further, hoping to get more of that. And just really glad I could use what I learned from the program.
Yeah, thanks, Kay. And I think both what Kay and Roxy were talking about, and Roxy teaches this, I believe, Roxy, it's these transferable skills that you can apply in different ways as innovation in your business, your organization. How does that impact your whole organizational culture? And what does that look like as new environments come up? So I think there's some, I would imagine for the students, lifelong skills, and for the adults we have in the program, certainly you're hearing it shift in other ways. There's a quick question that I'm going to answer as I transition to Mainza, and I think it was about how do you join the Mission Fuel cohort, but it could be how to join CEOs of Tomorrow. And for both the websites, if you maybe Roxy can pop it up at some point, the CEOs of Tomorrow, but Cardinal Stritch University, it hosts Mission Fuel, and there's more information through that. So we'll be happy to share more contact information. So let's transition to Mainza and hear some about your experience and what you're doing now.
Well, Mark, this is a perfect segue because my little piece that I'm going to talk about really is around organizational culture and the transferable skills I learned from Mission Fuel. And it wasn't just myself. The CEO of WIDA, Joaquin El Toro, actually was an advisory member to Mission Fuel as well. And so both Joaquin and I brought into WIDA, again, a quasi-government entity, just so much of what we learned in Mission Fuel. Earlier, I talked about innovation. You know, WIDA, again, being quasi-government, what that means is WIDA gets no state budget dollars. So everything that we do in WIDA is, you know, we generate revenues ourselves. Everything is expensed through our own budget. But there is still almost a government sort of mindset, right, within a quasi-government entity such as WIDA, which is very similar to a nonprofit, traditional nonprofit mindset. And so coming into WIDA, really what we brought forward into WIDA was the innovation piece and innovation around social impact, specifically around equity. Equity in underserved communities, equity in communities that we don't traditionally think about, such as our rural communities. And so it's really been about culture work at WIDA. You know, how do we shift behaviors? How do we shift mindsets with our leaders and our employees at WIDA to be much more innovative through the lens of social impact? And there are so many angles, so many layers that we can do this work at WIDA. And we do it at as many levels as possible. But again, through our organizational culture work is where that sustainable piece that we hope will come through happens. And so we have 4 key pillars of our culture work, one of which is innovation. The other is our equity, diversity, and inclusion work. And so these key pillars of culture resonate throughout all of WIDA, through our programs, through our resources, through, again, just how we relate to each other in the workplace. But in terms of products and resources that go out to the community, WIDA, most times, many of our work really is working with intermediaries. So not necessarily products that go directly to the communities, but through banks or through developers. So we issue state and federal tax credits to really incentivize affordable housing. We work with developers to allocate these tax credits to incentivize them to develop affordable housing. And so that's how we use intermediaries to really get resources out into our communities in Wisconsin. But one example of how we do social impact work through our partners and through the ways in which we can incentivize social impact, equity, is really in the developer space. We have what's called a QAP, our Qualified Allocation Plan. That's kind of our scoring system for how folks can qualify and apply for housing tax credits to develop housing projects. And what we just did this current year, and we're actually we're scoring applications right in this moment. But what we did to drive greater social impact was we have these developers who have been the usual suspects for many years working with WIDA in creating housing around the state. But we wanted to make sure there was access to other emerging developers, developers from underserved communities, women developers, disabled veteran-owned developers. And so we just added a couple more points to our QAP so that not only do these primary developers partner with emerging developers, but that there is ownership equity involved. And that is the social impact. And it's crazy. We had some 60 applications come through for this round. Over half of the applications came in with partnerships from emerging communities that have ownership equity in the game. This has completely changed the landscape of how this developing space looks like, so that we create access and social impact, not just with developers, with emerging developers who then use businesses from underserved communities. And so it's this whole cycle, this whole ecosystem of creating that social impact. And that goes back to what I alluded to earlier about how do you use your influence with community stakeholders, with partners, to also then ripple out that effect of creating social impact. And again, that is work that came through Mission Fuel, right? It's that social impact piece of Mission Fuel, but also making sure that you have the margins that the work stays sustainable. Part of the margins for WIDA, again, this is around our organizational culture work. WIDA is very blessed. You know, we are a very financially stable organization. But having said that, so then the challenge to our senior leaders was we are at a place where WIDA could take a little more risk, right? When we talk about financing, when we talk about projects that we could contribute monetary dollars to. So if we are in a much more financial stable condition, how can we do better at taking risk? Again, in creating greater social impact. So again, that goes back to the culture work and just shifting mindsets around every level of where do we create social impact, especially when we have a great profit margin. That profit should be used back for the greater good of our communities in the state. So I know I've kind of rambled and touched on several things, but the point of that was to just show how the transferable skills and concepts and philosophies learned in Mission Field transfer to now my work on a statewide basis through WIDA.
Yeah, thanks, Mines. I really appreciate the example of culture shift because it's such a tough thing to grasp sometimes, and how do you change it, kind of be a nebulous term, and your things said about it broadly, but that example of ownership and changing that systemic piece, and your point that it's not just you, right? It's had an effect, and it has to be connected to the ecosystem that we're all part of. So thanks, it's a great example. And thank you to WIDA also for being a Mission Field sponsor and that you're taking risks in lots of different ways. I love hearing that personally as a citizen and someone who is looking, how does government work or quasi-government agencies work, and can there be some risk? How do you achieve innovation in that space, which I think you spoke to powerfully. So I know we have just a few minutes left. I want to answer another question we saw in the Q&A, and then if anybody else has a last question, but I think we've also posted some contact information on the website, and certainly feel free to contact me, or if you have a specific interest in one of these organizations, please follow up. There's a question about FIT, what kind of organizations, it's related to what kind of organizations could benefit from the Mission Field program. And I think it's a great question because it's not for everyone. If you're looking to gain basic nonprofit management skills, that's not Mission Fuel. If you're learning how to form a board or form a 501c3 or doing some of those things, grant writing, talk to Kay. But if in general that's not Mission Fuel, Mission Fuel is for people who have those basics down and want to look into social enterprise work, want to look into social innovation, are comfortable with the idea of diversifying revenue streams. You heard about earned revenues, sponsorships, different kind of membership models, perhaps different things. You can look to Mission Fuel as a resource, but please talk to us more about that. And I want to, I know we need to wrap. I'm just making sure. One other questions. That's such a good question. I don't know if anyone wants to take it quick about should nonprofits be concerned about being in competition with for-profit businesses for revenue? And Roxy, you want to take a crack at that real quick?
Sure. I'd say no. One of the things that's happening even in the corporate world, we're all being driven to social good. Millennials today are looking to work for companies that are making social impact. Companies are looking to really make a difference in the communities in which they serve. So the pie is huge, and there's room for everybody to have a piece of the pie. I don't think it's competition. What we found is that companies are supporting us even more. For-profits are giving to our organization because of the work that we're doing. So I think it's a complement, one to the other, to be able to support one another around these social issues. And also, we may, as nonprofit leaders, be able to benefit from the revenue strength of these corporations and bring that revenue arm into our organizations.
Yeah. Thanks,
Hey, Mark,
Roxy.
if I could just add on to what Roxy said, it was definitely through Mission Fuel as well that, again, the shifting of mindset for, I think, many nonprofits and nonprofit leaders, we always think we should do things for free and we do everything for free, and that was the mind shift that happened through Mission Fuel was, no, not everything we do should be for free because we have a business to run and we need to create those profit margins so that we can continue doing our mission work. And I would add too that the second piece is nonprofits, whatever lane you're in, nonprofits provide such unique services that are also very different from for-profit services and goods as well. I think back to when I was at the Hmong Chamber, one of our ideas for our pitch had been to provide consulting services to for-profit corporations around cultural competency, because they were already, companies were already calling us for help on, how do we communicate with this particular community? How do we recruit from this particular community? We were doing that work for free. Now it was putting a price tag to it because we had that very unique skill set that we could offer to for-profit.
Yeah.
So 2 main things to remember.
Yeah, great. And thanks. I think we're gonna wrap with that very point. So we encourage you all to think about how your organizations have value. What's your value proposition? That it's okay to make some margin to support your mission and to keep thinking with that innovation mindset to grow and have the impact. So thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us. Thanks very much to my colleagues for being part of the panel. And we look forward to more of the conference.